Okay. Friends, the assembly will now come to order. Goftawi no naskumtanan. Kakioma. Aisino kamiyak. Kakiomi namichit. Nawakumanak. Kamiyak. Thank you, Creator of heaven and earth, for all the relatives you have given us on this earth. Those who walk, those who fly, those who crawl, and those who swim, and all of us. We give you thanks for this time we have together. Bless our time and our work in Jesus' name. Amen. The court of our church is now in session. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, oh Lord, we ask your blessing. We're moving to the business committee. John Barrett is coming to present.
Thank you, moderator. As we had informed you at the commencement of General Assembly, the Business Committee has assumed responsibility for the roll to leave and withdraw. I remind commissioners that should you have good cause to miss a Sederunt or leave Assembly before our final adjournment, you are to notify the Business Committee. In that regard, I have an interim report on roll to leave and withdraw. The Reverend Bill Dean, Presbytery of Prince Edward Island, will be absent from Sederunts 7, 8, and 9. Lori Kim Den Otter from the Presbytery of Kingston will be absent from Sederunt 5. We have also been informed that Daniel Kim from the Presbytery of Western Hanka is to be removed from the roll. I'd like to give you another reminder as well that should you wish to make an amendment to any of the recommendations that we'll be following, that you are to submit those in advance, ideally to the Business Committee, so that they can be posted on PC Biz. So you can either do it yourself through your laptop under the Submit Motions tab in PC Biz, or deliver a handwritten copy to Doug here at the Business Committee table. Thank you, moderator.
So the Life and Mission Agency Committee report is introduced by the convener, Donna McElveen.
Yes, I'm not very tall. Good afternoon, moderator. I'm here as convener of the Life and Mission Agency Committee, and so I will be presenting the report. The report you have before you under the committee section of PC Biz, you'll find it, and it contains much information on many of the programs and related work which has been entrusted to the committee by the General Assembly. And the areas of focus include justice, discernment for ministry, worship, stewardship, communication, support of new, renewing, and sustaining ministries, ministries with Indigenous peoples, working together with international church partners, and development and relief, and other matters that the church assigns to the LMA. In its work, the committee seeks to be always faithful to the mission and vision of the Presbyterian Church in Canada as it serves within the Presbyterian Church in Canada. Moderator, contained in this year's report is information on program support, Canadian ministries, communication, international ministries, justice ministries, ministry and church vocations, Presbyterian World Service and Development, stewardship, and planned giving. And within the report, there are recommendations. There are many recommendations, but they pertain to different aspects of the agency's work. But beyond those recommendations, there is a great deal of valuable information that, when used, can help equip church leaders. So I would encourage all the commissioners, guests, visitors, everybody else to explore the whole report. The report and recommendations are before the court, moderator, and all the recommendations of the Life and Mission Agency Committee will be moved by Teresa McDonald Lee of the Presbytery of Huron, Perth, who is to my left, and seconded by Nicole Reed of the Presbytery of Niagara, who is also present in the court. Moderator, there are consent recommendations, and we ask that recommendation number 6 be pulled from the consent recommendation as a committee. That was just an oversight on our part. So the consent recommendations that are before the General Assembly are 7, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31. Moved and seconded. Yes, moderator?
If any commissioner wishes to discuss a recommendation in the consent list, now is the time to seek that recognition and ask that it be removed. Number 3.
Thank you, moderator. Chris Clark, Presbytery of Ottawa, number 14, please.
Any other comments, discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that motion is carried. We'll now consider the revised consent recommendation.
Just the recommendation. So we have the remaining recommendations, moderator. But
On the screen.
are they on the screen? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we're okay. So you have the consent and you have the remaining recommendations. But before we turn to those recommendations, moderator, before we consider them, we would like to present the work of Presbyterian World Service and Development. So I would welcome the convener, Teresa McDonald Lee, at this time to address the court.
Thank you, moderator. The ministry of Presbyterian World Service and Development is rooted in the living hope of Jesus Christ and inspired by God's promise of abundant life. For 75 years now, PWS&D has been a vital part of how the Presbyterian Church in Canada follows the call to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. I'm glad for the chance to share this vital work with the Assembly today on behalf of the PWS&D Committee, our partners around the world who do the work on the ground, and on behalf of those whose lives have been changed through your generosity. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge current PWS&D committee members in the court today, Kello from Alberta, Donna from Saskatchewan, and Laura from Manitoba. In 2022, the church commemorated 75 years of work in humanitarian assistance, sustainable development, and refugee sponsorship through PWS&D. We recently closed this time with a service of Thanksgiving that you can still watch online on YouTube. Last year, PWS&D contributed $8.2 million worth of development and relief programs where most needed around the world. I don't want to pass over that number too quickly. $8.2 million worth of development work. We, all of us, you and I, even in the midst of change and uncertainty, contributed over $8 million worth of disaster relief and development programs. This money comes from different sources and places in different ways. Most significantly, $3.7 million was given to PWS&D in direct donations from members of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. Close to $500,000 of that was contributed by legacy funds and gifts of securities to the Loaves and Fishes Fund. The response to Ukraine was substantial, with over $900,000 raised. These funds have been put to work with Hungarian Interchurch Aid in the ACT Alliance, with the Canadian Food Grains Bank, and with a local partner. We were very pleased to see that the funds donated for the Ukraine relief did not take away from the resources needed to respond to other situations in the world, many of which do not receive the same level of media attention. Another source of funding is through the growing projects of the Canadian Food Grains Bank. From Prince Edward Island to Alberta, Presbyterian growing projects contributed over $400,000 to PWS&D's account at CFGB. Rural congregations make this possible, doing what they do best to feed the world. And our membership in the Canadian Food Grains Bank is the key to the story of how PWS&D is able to leverage our donations and help them to multiply. For the last 30 years, we've been able to work with other churches and with the Canadian government to address critical food needs in the world. Last year, PWS&D led a large humanitarian response to the floods in Pakistan, which was also supported by many other churches at the Canadian Food Grains Bank. With $600,000 donated by Presbyterians, we led and continue to lead a multi-million-dollar response, providing essential food items to thousands of families affected in Pakistan. Unfortunately, there is one place in the world where we are not able to help right now, and that is Afghanistan. Canada's sanctions on the Taliban have prevented us from being able to provide much-needed humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. That country has now gone through 2 winters since the Taliban has taken hold of the country, and the level of suffering is reaching critical levels. There is some progress on this issue with a bill before the Canadian government right now, but it will require more advocacy to expedite that bill through the Parliament. And we ask for your assistance in this work. In 2022, PWS&D supported congregations from Nova Scotia to British Columbia in the sponsorship of refugees. 43 refugees originating from 8 countries arrived in Canada last year. And the hard work of congregations in this ministry of welcome is essential. It was heartening to see this assembly's embrace and passion for refugee sponsorship. And I would encourage you to speak to Guy or other PWS&D staff members about how your congregation can become involved in sponsoring a refugee. Finally, the PWS&D committee noted this year that this marked Guy's 25 years on PWS&D staff, with the last many years as the executive director, and he and his staff do an incredible job on all of our behalf. So congratulations, Guy. I hope that many of you received an email this morning from PWS&D, and if you didn't, please go and sign up for the newsletters so you know what is happening. An urgent appeal has just been put out by the Humanitarian Coalition to respond to the crisis in Sudan and in neighboring countries. Due to the conflict in Sudan and the Democratic Republic in Congo and extreme climate weather events happening in that region in the world, there is a response needed to provide much needed food. And the countries impacted are Ethiopia, Kenya, South Sudan, and Sudan. The government of Canada has offered to match these donations until the end of June, so know that every dollar that you give is multiplied. So please donate generously to this important appeal. We can never underestimate the reach of this agency of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, working together with so many churches and partners towards a more compassionate, sustainable, and just world. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you to the congregations and presbyteries who make the mission of PWS&D possible. Together, we are making a difference. And I'm pleased now to share with you a video that was put together for the 75th anniversary called Practical Compassion.
Each child of God is born in a place they did not choose.
For some, it means access to an abundance of resources. For others, it means a lifetime of struggle to stay alive. For 75 years, the Church has recognized the need to act so that all of God's children may live with dignity. God has provided us with a planet of abundance, with enough for all. We are called to build bridges of solidarity and to reach out where needed to share the blessings we have been given. Every year, Presbyterian World Service and Development responds to daily need as well as large and small disasters around the world. We respond because we are called by Christ to do so, based on need and regardless of faith, race, or gender. Through sustainable development projects, people have better health and food security, as well as sustainable livelihoods both now and for the future. In the face of stigma and injustice, PWSND helps people in communities advocate for their rights. In times of disaster, access to food, water and sanitation, shelter, and emotional support is provided for people dealing with conflict and climate emergencies. With support from presbyteries, congregations, and individuals, refugees are sponsored and welcomed to Canada. The Church's work in development, relief, and refugee sponsorship is a concrete way to provide hope where there is often only despair. From despair to hope, with the work of our partners, new sustainable futures emerge. Together, we will continue to foster peace and Christian unity through ecumenical collaborations, nationally and globally. The members and congregations of the Presbyterian Church in Canada are key to this ongoing story of practical compassion. Thank you for joining us in living out Jesus' call to love our neighbor as ourselves.
We move now to recommendation 1.
Correct. Moderator, recommendation 1 is concerning leading with care. The wording of the recommendation that to the new material proposed in the report above, those words be added to leading with care, and that the minor edits to the original text be approved. So recommendation 1 is moved and seconded.
Are there any questions? The YARs and student reps, how do you vote? Yes? Any opposed? No. Commissioners, you have been advised. Commissioners, how do you vote? In favor? Those opposed? It is passed.
Moderator, recommendation number 2 also is concerning leading with care policy, that the Life and Mission Agency be given permission to make minor changes to the guidelines versus the policy statement of leading with care, a policy for ensuring a climate of safety in the Presbyterian Church in Canada for the sake of clarity and ease of reading, and to update the information in it to reflect changes approved by the General Assembly and changes in Canadian law. Recommendation number 2 is also moved and seconded.
Any questions? Advisory vote from the YARs and the student reps. All in favor? Any opposed? Commissioners, you've been advised. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. We move
Moderator,
to recommendation,
Yeah, my apologies.
recommendation 3.
Recommendation number 3 is before you, that the above revised policy and procedures for addressing harassment in the church be approved. Recommendation 3 is moved and seconded.
Any questions? Yaris? Are you in favor? Any opposed? Commissioners be advised. All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We move to recommendation 4.
Moderator, recommendation 4 is with respect to guidelines for dealing with mental health issues. And the recommendation is that the above proposed revisions to the guidelines for dealing with mental health issues 2011 be adopted. Moved and
And-
seconded. Yeah.
Any questions? Okay, the young adults are YARS and student reps. Are you in favor? Any opposed? Commissioners, you've been advised. All in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Recommendation 6 or 5.
Moderator, recommendation number 5 is that the Life and Mission Agency be given permission to make minor changes to the guidelines for dealing with mental health issues for the sake of clarity and ease of reading, and to update information to reflect changes approved by the General Assembly.
Any questions? YARS and student reps, are you in favor? Any opposed? Commissioners, be advised. Are you in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that's carried. We move to recommendation 6.
Yes, Moderator, recommendation 6 was pulled from the consent agenda, but it reads as follows: that the prayer of overture number 17, 2018, read the ministry and mental health, be answered in terms of this report.
Moved and seconded.
Yes, moved and seconded by the same mover and seconder.
Yaris, are you in favor? Oh, sorry. Or any questions?
Number 6 we pulled. Yes, correct.
Okay. So Yaris and student reps, are you in favor? Any opposed? Commissioners, you've been advised. Commissioners, how do you vote? All in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. 7. Okay. We move to recommendation 8.
Recommendation 8, Moderator, is regarding a different topic than the ones previously considered. That the prayer of overture number 15, 2022, requesting the church to support the efforts to return the Manitou Inniskim stone, be answered in terms of the above report. Recommendation 6 moved and seconded.
Any questions, number 2?
Thank you, Moderator. Kathy Gale, Presbytery of Calgary-McLeod. I just want to offer a brief comment and reflection. It was my privilege to also be a part of this listening session that was held last September that has already been brought to the attention of the Assembly. And it was a very eye-opening and awakening 4 hours for me personally, but also very enlightening, I think, for many people. And I just want to offer encouragement to all commissioners, wherever they come from, that if they have the opportunity to learn about the Indigenous cultures of the lands that they live on, and about the artifacts that might be present in their communities, it is a very valuable and important part of being able to begin the journey of reconciliation. So I just want to offer my support and encouragement for this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions or comments? Yaris, are you in favor? Any opposed? Commissioners, you've been advised, and you vote. Are you in favor? Here you are. Any opposed? That's carried. Going to quit. Where are we now? Recommendation 9.
Moderator, recommendation number 9 is that the Presbyterian Church in Canada affirms its support for the return of the stone known as the Manitou Inniskim stone and contribute $1,000 in support of the stone's return. Recommendation 9 is moved and seconded.
Yars, are you in favor? Oh, sorry. Any discussion? Yars, are you in favor? Commissioners, you've been advised. Are you in favor? Yes, good. Any opposed? That's carried. Going to recommendation number 10.
Moderator, recommendation 10 is that the Presbyterian Church in Canada affirm the vital importance of returning Indigenous spiritual and cultural artifacts that were taken without permission to the communities from where they were taken. Recommendation 10 is moved and seconded.
Any questions? Are the Yars in favor of this motion? Any opposed? You've been advised. Commissioners, are you in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. And I'll move to recommendation 14.
Moderator, recommendation 14, that the continuing education allowance be increased to $750 effective January the 1st, 2024.
Seconded.
Yes.
Mike 3.
Thank you, Moderator. Chris Clark, Presbytery of Ottawa. I submitted a amendment to this that's seconded by Jim Pott in Ottawa.
Okay. Did you want to speak to that now?
I'd be happy to. So I'm grateful that this got brought up because it hasn't changed since 2001. And I've noticed that many ministers, we don't like to come cap in hand to looking for things. I know people whose housing allowance hasn't increased in a decade, and it's because they won't ask. I would like to do some education stuff. We heard about great things happening at our schools. We had a great video of CREEF. And for those of us who live more than 100 kilometers from these places, just getting to them would take my entire education allowance. And so it's a nice perk if you can use it. It's also more than a perk. We're hearing a lot about how much change is happening, how much struggle is happening, how tired ministers are, how many things we need to learn. And so I think it would be helpful. So when I read the report, I was really excited. I started spending money before I got to the end of the report. I don't know if anybody else read it, but the lowest other number given was $900 a year. The next one was $1,100, and then the United Church was a bit over $1,500. And I thought, wow, it's going to go so high from $6. And then it was $750, and I thought, no. So my proposal is that we would make it $1,000, which would still leave us quite near the bottom of education allowances amongst mainline churches, and then increase it $100 a year for 5 years, which means in 5 years from now, we would be where the United Church is today, which I'm guessing means in 5 years we'll be behind them again. But nevertheless, it would be useful. And so that's my motion, and I would test the will of the court for it.
Any other comments? Mike 1.
Roberto DeSandley, Presbytery of Northern Saskatchewan. I'd like to speak in favor of the motion that was presented, and I agree. I think it is sort of at the moment treated as a perk, something to help with maybe tuition, maybe a little bit of travel or a few meals, but it's certainly not something that would allow you to attend in person an event. I will mention, as a St. Andrews Hall alumnus, that the Gooder Scholars Program is an excellent program that I look forward to taking part in this year, and there is a bursary available. Hope I'm not out of order in promoting.
Mike 2.
Moderator, Kavanaugh, Vancouver Island. I always understood that it was the minimum continuing education allowance, not that it was the continuing education allowance. So that's what I think, I think it should read, that that we are suggesting minimums within our within the denomination. We're not suggesting the exact amount. So I believe it should read that the minimum continuing allowance be increased, and I would speak in favor of the amendment that has been proposed.
Should be a minimum. Okay, that's fine. Our apologies for leaving out, but we understood to be minimum along with other stipend, et cetera. So.
Okay, let's change the motion. Change the amendment that's on the screen.
Minimum.
Adding the word minimum. Wait, so it was 600. So we're waiting for the amendment to be completed. Mike 2.
Christine O'Brien, Presbytery of Waterloo, Wellington. I am going to try and move that a little bit. How's that? Better. Christine O'Brien, Presbytery of Waterloo, Wellington. I want to speak in favor. I can't get more excited about this motion. It's not possible. I can't wait to vote. I regularly am hearing stories from people. A lot of pastors come to Creve Hills on personal retreats, and I know how exhausted they are. I know also how essential it is for sessions and congregations to gather to do something besides work. And I do really believe that we need to build opportunities for Sabbath keeping as a spiritual practice into what we do. So this is a great start. I agree. I mean, it would be great to keep up to the United Church, but I think this is a terrific start. So I am super duper in favor.
Thank you. Number 3.
Thank you, Moderator. Sean Howard, West Toronto. Well, I personally love the motion and would personally benefit from the motion. I feel it would be helpful to hear an opposing voice. I will have to oppose this amendment because I know of a number of congregations in my own presbytery for which this will further strain their financial position. If we are going to go ahead and vote increases, I'm going to say for ourselves, but for the ministers among us and ministers across the country, then I think something needs to be done to recognize that this will put further financial strain on congregations that are already struggling. I have no suggestion to make, but I wanted to insert that into the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 1.
Thank you, Barb Sargent from the Presbytery of Essex, Kent. We've heard from a number of teaching elders. I'm a ruling elder, and I appreciate our leaders, and I value the time and the effort and that they put into maintaining and building their skills. And I think as ruling elders, we need to support them. And I'm very much in favor of this amendment because I think our teaching elders need that support.
Mike 3.
Moderator Emma Duncan, Presbytery of Hamilton. I actually agree with my colleague that just spoke, Sean. I have been a minister for 9.5 years, and I'm just starting my third stint as an interim moderator in my presbytery. While I would benefit greatly from this, and I would go and see Christine more often at Creve Hills, I do worry about us putting more financial strain on our congregations, especially at the last General Assembly. We were given a substantial pay increase as well. And so I'm just concerned about the financial health of our congregations. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 1.
Moderator John Borthwick from Presbytery of Waterloo, Wellington. I will be voting in favor of the amendment. As someone who has had a lifelong commitment to lifelong learning, it's been something that I've invested into personally. So over the years, when I've received a modest increase, I've actually invited my treasurer to put it into my continuing education amount as a way of building it up, to recognize that for $750 even, one couldn't likely pay for even one course or some conferences and things like that in the 1 year. So I'm delighted to see through this amendment the potential of the church taking a lead in supporting our ministers. I recognize that it would be an increase beyond the $750. The total increase would be $400 a year to a congregation. And if we want ministers to last in pastoral ministry for a long time, say somebody who's been in one congregation for 20 years, then we need to encourage them. And that $400 a year extra investment, I think is money well spent. And since there was a plug for something, people know about me, not what you're thinking, but also this might go towards individuals taking the opportunity of an intermission, which needs to be considered. And if you don't know what an intermission is, I would encourage you go to the abbey.ca and check out our free webinar on intermissions that'll be held at the end of the month.
Thank you. Number 4.
Henry Reinders, Presbytery of Grey Bruce, Maitland. I speak in favor of this motion as well. I am not a minister, I am an elder. And I think it's important to recognize what our ministers do. They are not overpaid by any means with their regular salary. And I have often said to the people in our church that we cannot run the church on the backs of our ministers. And so this is very much deserved by them.
Thank you. Number 3.
James Monroe, Presbytery of Barrie. I'm just trying to understand this section compared to the previous section about the Continuing Education Fund in terms of the resources we as a church provide to our ministers versus the resources a congregation provides to our ministers. And so I'm trying to understand where I am on this particular motion. Is the Continuing Education Fund oversubscribed? Do you reject applications on an annual basis, or is everybody applying for them? Continuing education, I understand that, but a lot of the conversation has been about how ministers are constrained because the existing $600, $750 is not sufficient. I'm trying to understand what other options there are. I'm trying to balance the concern that raising the minimum for a congregation may put stress on someone, but we in this room collectively are going, we want to fund more. So is that fund available, or it's very, very small?
If I could ask the Associate Secretary for Ministry and Church Vocations to perhaps answer your question, that would be appreciated.
Thank you.
He would be able to speak with more detail.
Moderator, briefly, the continuing education allowance that this recommendation and the amendment refers to is the amount that congregations will provide as part of the terms of a minister's call to make allowance for study leave and continuing education. The continuing education fund that you're referring to in the other part of the report refers to a special fund that ministers can apply to for particular program studies. There are two different things. Ministers can apply for the continuing education, but all ministers, in the terms of their call, get the minimum that the General Assembly establishes.
So all ministers aren't eligible for the continuing education fund?
If they meet the criteria and the guidelines
Okay.
with their proposal, yes, their application can be considered.
Okay, thanks, moderator.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, mic number 1, sorry.
Thank you, moderator. Susanna Hamilton, Yar from Prince Edward Island. I would like to speak in favor of this. I'm not a minister, obviously, but I am the daughter of 2 ministers. And I know firsthand how important study leave is. I know that it could be a bit of a strain on some congregations, but ministers do work on study leave, and every minute that they spend on study leave goes back into the church for the rest of the year. And so I know that I can only advise everyone else in the Yar vote later on, but I do think that it is worth it because all the money that is invested does go back to the church in teaching and learning for the congregation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Number 3.
John Reed, Presbytery of Hamilton. Sort of in relation to the question a moment ago, I served as on the committee for continuing education grants for 4 years and was briefly the convener. And I can say that resource is there, but as a committee, we always had to be judicious about making sure those grants went to as many people as possible. And it was often seeing the expense of a lot of these courses and how the continuing education allowance doesn't really cover, as has been said by a number of my colleagues in ministry, cover much. And so, but even then, that is not one thing we also found out on that committee is that so many ministers don't even know that these continuing education grants exist as much as we as committees of the General Assembly would try and promote them. And this is something that makes sure that every single minister has this as part of their call and doesn't need to fill out paperwork to access it as well. And so I speak in favor of this. I also, being mindful, we've heard from mainly teaching elders like myself. If there's any other ruling elders who could perhaps speak to this, because I do also want to be mindful of our congregations and appreciate the input of ruling elders as we consider this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mic 4.
Hello, Anna McIntosh from Huron Perth Presbytery. I think that I know a lot less about the way that ministers are compensated than a lot of people in this room, but I think that from what I've heard so far today, it seems like there are certain ministers who face a less accessible circumstance than other ministers. It takes a lot more money to get from one place to another. And as a person who traveled from a more rural area here, I know how much it cost me to get from the car to the bus, to the Uber, to the airport, and that alone was extremely pricey. And so I think that in our efforts to become a more diverse and accessible church that is educated in a diverse and accessible way, we need to put focus on giving access to those in less accessible areas to that same type of education so that we can have that type of diversity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And number 3.
Moderator, Clark from Presbytery of Niagara. I'm a ruling elder, and my understanding is that amount is accumulative up to 5 years. So you can take the 5 years, put them together, and you'll have a larger amount for your education.
Okay.
I'm speaking in favor.
Yes, just to clarify or to expand upon what you said briefly, that yes, in the call, all ministers that are called, and also sometimes in appointments, there is continuing education minimum, continuing education allowance promised, and that it is cumulative up to 5 years. So it could be put together for 2 years, 3 years, but up to 5 years. Yes, so it is one avenue of pooling the resources.
Thank you.
Are there any more
Linda Pollock, Hamilton Presbytery. I would like to speak in favor of this motion. I know that it will perhaps not be something that some of our congregations will smile about at first, but I think if we look at it in terms of parents who put their kids through university, an average year for my daughter, she takes 4 courses a semester, cost us $9,000. And that is over $1,000 a course. And that's not including her books. So $1,000 a year for a minister to take maybe 1 course is still not in line with what it will cost. So I would like to speak in favor of the motion of starting with the $1,000 and increasing $100 each year.
Thank you. Number 2.
Yes, moderator. My name is Kathy Twynham. I'm from West Toronto. I want to express my conflict about this amendment. I am totally in support of ministers. I'm a ruling elder. I've spent a large part of my life supporting in any way I can any minister that I have worked with. And I absolutely agree that, you know, whatever amount that we decide they should receive as an allowance for continuing education may not be enough. My only concern, and I tend to support my friend Sean Howard on this, in many congregations, it would be an added burden. So my concern is to ensure that the amount requested is actually used for continuing education. We've had experience in the past where that has been a concern. So if, you know, a minister requests whatever amount for continuing education, that's wonderful as long as it's used for continuing education.
Moderator.
I just wanted to express my concern.
Thank you. Moderator, I would remind everybody 2 things. One, that there are continuing education guidelines, which you can find on the Ministry and Church Vocations website. And also it's a responsibility of the presbytery to ensure that all continuing education requests are approved. So the continuing education request comes to the presbytery. And so there is oversight. So a minister is not to just go off on a continuing education without the presbytery's awareness. And also congregations are to set aside the money. So if they do accumulate it, it needs to be accessible. If they can accumulate it for more than 1 year. So a few factors to keep in mind. There is oversight because the presbytery has responsibility in that area.
Okay, number 3.
Robert Royal, Oak Ridges Presbytery. I will move, and this is seconded by David Wilson of the Presbytery of Brandon. A call for the vote, please.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we're going to vote to take an immediate vote. Yars, are you in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Commissioners, you've been advised. Are you in favor of an immediate vote? Any opposed? Okay. We are voting on the amendment on the screen that the minimum continuing education allowance be increased to $1,000 effective January 1st, 2024, and that it increases $100 per year for the following 5 years. And Yars, how do you vote? In favor? Commissioners, or any opposed? Commissioners, you've been advised. Are you in favor? Any opposed? It carries. 18. Recommendation 18.
Okay. Moderator, we move to recommendation 18 under Presbyterian World Service and Development report. Is there a question? Sorry.
Moderator, that was we just approved the amendment. We haven't approved the amended motion yet.
Motion as amended.
Oh, I thought we did that. No. Okay.
One more.
Okay. Looking at the screen. Now do I have to ask the R's again? Are you in favor? Including the R's? Yeah. No. Any not in favor? It's carried.
And now these guys.
Where are we? Uh-oh. What's happening here?
Sorry, Roberto DeSandley, Presbyterian Northern Saskatchewan. I think there's the mutterings of confusion are whether that was the YAR vote or the general vote, and I think we just need a little clarification on
We
each
did
vote.
both. Sorry, we'll do it separately. Okay. Yars, will you vote again? Are you in favor? Yars and student reps. Yes, commissioners have been advised. Are you in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Okay. So now we're 18.
Yep. Okay. So we now move to recommendation number 18 under the Presbyterian World Service and Development portion of the report. Recommendation 18, moderator, reads that that congregations and individuals be encouraged to advocate for legislative changes that would enable Canadian civil society organizations like Presbyterian World Service and Development to provide humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. And Teresa McDonald-Lee spoke to that in her part of the report earlier. Recommendation 18 is moved and seconded.
Any questions? Yars and student reps, are you in favor? Commissioners be advised. Are you in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Recommendation 23.
Moderator, recommendation 23 is that appreciation be expressed to the congregations, individuals, and groups who support Presbyterians sharing with prayers, financial gifts, and volunteering for committees and working groups, participating in programs and advocacy campaigns for justice. Recommendation 23 is moved and seconded.
Any questions? Yars and student reps, are you in favor? Any opposed? Yars or commissioners be advised. Are you in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Recommendation number, we're done.
Just have a few comments. Yeah. Moderator, the recommendations have all come before the court with discussion and adoption accordingly. But I would like to just end with a few comments. First, to say that we are grateful to God for the legacy of faith and hope left by those who have shared planned gifts with the church. And through these funds, initiatives such as those that were adopted earlier by the General Assembly during the International Affairs Committee report are able to be implemented. So we are grateful for those planned gifts and other funds that the Life and Mission Agency Committee oversees, as well as other committees, have specific terms of reference, and they are carefully adhered to and reviewed on a regular basis. But just to affirm that we are grateful for all gifts to Presbyterian sharing and planned gifts as well. In addition, I would just like to thank past members of the Life and Mission Agency, the current members of the Life and Mission Agency Committee, and future, because the committee to nominate report has not been adopted yet, but the future committee members who will be serving on the committee, to thank everybody and the staff, advisory committees, everybody who works well as a good team, to all who work so well to enable the work of the Life and Mission Agency to move forward in the many ways that it does. A couple of other things, moderator. We have a new associate secretary working under the Life and Mission Agency, and that's Callie Long, who is associate secretary for communications. And I know some people have had a chance to meet her at the communications desk at the back, but just to acknowledge that she began her work in October. So we thank Callie for joining the team. And moderator, on a more somber note, this year, 4 former mission staff who served with global partners passed away this year. And we are grateful to God for their witness, their work, and their life. And I name specifically the Reverend Charles Scott, Clarabelle McIntosh, Dr. Pauline Brown, and the Reverend Roger Talbot. Moderator, the work that the church does together through all of its committees of the General Assembly in Canada and around the world would not be possible without the generous support that is given to Presbyterian Sharing, PWS&D, and many special funds of the church which enable those committees to do the work. So on behalf of a grateful church, we thank all individuals and congregations that are so very generous with their time, talents, prayers, and financial gifts that support the work that we do together. And each year the church is the recipient of legacy gifts, which I mentioned earlier, and we are indeed grateful for all of those who support and strongly support the work of the church. Moderator, I believe that concludes.
I want to acknowledge number 4 before you do my apologies.
Yes, my apologies. Sometimes
Number 4.
Hello, Seth Law from.
Hold on just a second. Okay. We're going to watch a video and then we'll get to.
Okay.
Number 4.
Hello, Seth Law from VR from Central Alberta. I had submitted a motion. I was reading through the reports, and number 10 had caught my eye when we are trying to support.
Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Donna Richard, Central Alberta.
Okay.
Sorry. When I was reading the recommendation number 10 about returning artifacts to the correct Indigenous populations, I felt that there should be some support for monetary backing and also some resources from like the archives and that to just help congregations help return them, because a lot of them cannot afford that, and it would just be helpful to have some backing.
I'm going to ask the clerk to address that, or no, maybe you can.
Thank you for bringing this up. This is an important question, and returning anything that may be in the possession of congregations that was taken without permission from Indigenous people or Indigenous communities is an important part of the Church's work and Canada's work of healing and reconciliation. I should just say that if there was any congregation that was in possession of anything that should be returned, we would always work with the presbytery, the congregation, the synod, any colleges, any committees, to help them in any way that we could to return anything. There would already be some funds available for that, and so we wouldn't need to establish new funds, as there are some already in place.
Perfect. Thank you.
If that helps.
Would you like to withdraw the motion?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. Bob, number 3.
Bob Wilson, Presbytery of Assiniboia. Moderator, through you, I'd like to thank the LMA for this report. And in particular, I would like to emphasize the hard work that Presbyterian World Service and Development does in assisting congregations who want to support refugees. One of the congregations in my presbytery happens to be the congregation in which I most often worship. First Presbyterian Church had applied for refugees from Sudan for a family and had been attempting to get them to Canada for 6 years through Presbyterian World Service and Development's efforts on our behalf. We were successful in having the family of 5 join us for their very first winter on December the 15th of this past year. And they are doing very well, but without the work of PWS&D, it probably would have been an impossible task. We did wait for 6 years, but we are very grateful for the assistance that made it possible. So thank you, through you, moderator, to PWS&D for this especially important work.
Thank you, Bill. Bob, sorry. Mike 4.
Henry Reinders, Presbytery of Grey Bruce Maitland. I would like to thank Teresa McDonald-Lee for her excellent PWS&D report and specifically highlight the Canadian Food Grains Bank portion of that report. I have a bias there because I have been involved with Canadian Food Grains Bank as with a growing project in our Meaford area for many, many years. It does wonderful work. I have been to Malawi on a learning tour with Canadian Food Grains Bank, seeing the Presbyterian Church projects there. Amazing results when you hear a farmer say that through some of the simple training he's had, he's increased his production by 600%. It means a world of difference to those folks. I am the Ontario Regional Rep for Canadian Food Grains Bank. And of course, the Presbyterian Church is one of 15 members that make up the Food Grains Bank. And I would encourage you all to learn more about the Food Grains Bank. One of the things we do as reps in our provinces, and we have reps in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, as well as eastern provinces here, is we are free to come to your church to speak about the work of Canadian Food Grains Bank. And I would encourage you to do that. One of the things that we're also doing is trying to connect rural congregations and urban congregations through Grow Hope projects. Guy has an excellent one going in the Toronto area, and it's a great way to learn more about rural life if you're an urban person. So I encourage you to look up Canadian Food Grains Bank, look at who we are, and become involved with that. I think I'm the only Presbyterian on staff currently at Canadian Food Grains Bank, and so please use us to your benefit.
Thank you.
Moderator, the report of the Life and Mission Agency is now completed, so thank you to everybody. Now the motion to adopt the report as a whole, moved and seconded.
Yars, are you in favor? And student reps? Any opposed? Commissioners, you've been advised. Are you in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you, Moderator.
Moving now on to the Church Doctrine Committee. Sorry. Number 3.
Moderator, I just wanted to we'd like to remove one of the upcoming recommendations on the consent agenda for Church Doctrine Committee.
So the report is introduced by committee member Jeremy Bell-Smith.
Before that begins, Moderator, might I just, Matthew Rattan, Presbytery of Barrie, can I register my dissent for the adoption of the report of the whole, and I'll submit my reasons in 10 days.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Moderator. As mentioned, my name is Jeremy Bell-Smith, and I am the Secretary of the Committee on Church Doctrine. Our convener, Wally Hong, sends his regrets as he's not able to be with us at the Assembly today. Moderator, I will make the motions from Vancouver Island Presbytery, and they'll be seconded by Roland DeVries of the Presbytery of Montreal. I move that we receive and consider the committee's report. I don't need to do that. Then I don't do that. All right. The committee exists to consider and report on all matters of faith and order which the Venerable Assembly sends to it for consideration. It makes recommendations regarding these things that may impact our confessional position, makes those recommendations to the General Assembly so that we might continue our faithful witness to the gospel of Jesus Christ. This past year, we met twice in person, and multiple subcommittees met as well and continued their work through the year. As we reported, many of the projects that we've been moving along include the preambles to the ordination, the relationship between church and state in our post-Christian contexts, and what unity in a church as diverse as ours might look like. We've also begun theological reflection on the doctrine of discovery and exploring the ways it may have influenced our ministry and practice. On behalf of the convener and the whole committee, thank you for the opportunity to serve Christ and his church in this way. Our report contains 2 consent motions, which are our responses to items referred to us by the 147th General Assembly. All motions are moved by myself and seconded by Roland DeVries, Presbytery of Montreal. Then I move that motion that numbers 1 and 2 be adopted by consent.
Moderator, I would like to remove recommendation C-002 from the consent agenda.
Me too, and there's only 2 of them, so I guess it's one at a time.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll do the one at a time. Sounds good.
Just to clarify again, a consent agenda, a consent recommendation can't have just one. So we had 2, we're down to 1, so we're just going to do them one by one now.
All right. So the first recommendation is that the documents listed above be noted as historic documents, and we recommended to the church to be referred to as needed.
Any discussion? Number 1.
I'm Matthew Rattan, the Presbytery of Barrie. It's really just, I support the idea of listing them as historic documents, absolutely. My question is really just for clarity, because in the documents, which have been many over the years, there's kind of 4 categories, the last of which says documents which were circulated but not approved, and it lists some, but then the recommendation is they're all historic documents. So I just wasn't sure what exactly that meant and wondered if I could have some clarity before I know how to vote on that.
Thanks. So what has happened there is that there are documents that the General Assembly has approved that become statements of the church. There's documents that we've referred to the General Assembly that have been sent down for study, but they were not approved. And so what we are suggesting is that while we itemize those differently and talk about them differently, we consider all of them historical documents of the church.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks. Just the thought was there's, pretty believe that 2 of them, the one in the category 2, what the Bible teaches on covenanted monogamous same-sex relationships, category 4, the historic argument concerning human sexuality. So these are both produced co-jointly by the Doctrine Committee in 2017. They were part of the ongoing discussion. So is the idea that the one arguing for historic male-female marriage is not continued to be used as a resource when the other one was? So I guess just clarity on that, because I think they're both part of the ongoing discussion. So I'm not sure if that's kind of going to disappear or not.
Yeah. So my understanding and the way that we've articulated this is that the documents that are listed as approved were ones that were officially endorsed as statements of the church by the assembly. Others that were recommended for reference or that had been worked on and studied by the assembly but not approved are not actual statements of the assembly. They were not adopted as doctrinal statements.
Okay, I don't know if anyone else has more historic or accurate memory on this than me, but I'm pretty sure they're both used for part of the discussion. Neither one of them are doctrine. So I think I'll have to vote against the motion then, because to me this indicates that those 2 documents will not be treated equally, and I think at the time that they were intended to be so as historic documents as a part of the ongoing discussions. Thank you.
Any more questions? Number 3.
James Monroe, Presbytery of Barrie. Just to follow up on my fellow commissioner's comment, it's the second section, the other related documents are. Does that imply that they were approved or just circulated? I think it would be cleared up, and I don't want to edit the report, but that second section, section 3 and 4, say here are things that were approved, here are things that were not approved, but section 1 and 2 does not make it clear whether or not those documents were approved or not. So the question, to be specific, was Acts of Proceedings 2017, what the Bible teaches on covenantal magnanimous same-sex relationships. Was that an approved document or not?
Thank you, moderator. So I don't have that list right in front of me, I'm afraid. So I'm at a bit of a disadvantage. My understanding was those ones that were listed as approved were approved by the General Assembly. Thank you. Just to clarify, moderator, through you, the question is in regards to the first section, the documents which address the topic of gender identity, is that correct? You asked about whether they are approved or not approved. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the same section that you're asking the question on. So if you could help me clarify that.
Moderator, with respect to the section that says, here are documents which are on the topic of gender identity, it lists 2 documents. It doesn't say whether or not they were one way or the other. But then in the 4th section, body, mind, and soul is listed as an example of something which was not approved. In the 2nd section, it talks about other related documents. It doesn't say whether or not they were approved or not. And then in the 4th section, the companion report, which was just the second half of the Church Doctrine Committee's report, is expressly listed as not approved, implying perhaps that the first one was. And then it matters for the historical record in terms of interpreting how these were viewed. They're just not, it's not clear. That's all.
Thank you. Yeah, we had referenced the history of the church, and again, wasn't the one to put this particular piece together, so I can't say whether that is meant that they were not approved. That is, that they were approved, only that they were not approved by the Assembly as doctrinal statements. Clear as mud.
Number 3.
Thank you, moderator. Sean Howard, West Toronto. I just wondered if, and I didn't bring my card up to see the kinds of motions, but can we lay this on the table until the committee can come back and clarify specifically which reports are in which category? It seems there's some confusion around that, and that seems to be a sticking point. So I would move that we, and correct me if I should have a different motion here, that we lay this on the table until the committee can clarify which reports are in which category. I have no seconder. I have a few seconders.
You say your name, a seconder? James Monroe.
Seconded by James Monroe Barry.
Okay.
Point of order, moderator. I just have a
The
question
motion-
or clarification.
Please, just a moment. Oh, you addressed
I just want to know what that means. I'm sorry. I'm not a new commissioner, but I should know, but I don't know what that means.
We're going to postpone it until we're ready to talk about it again.
Okay.
Moderator, it means that someone, if we vote to table, that means that someone who has voted to table will have to make a motion at an appropriate time later on to remove the report from being tabled, and then we'll get back to it where we're at.
Moderator, Roberto DeSandley, the Presbytery of Northern Saskatchewan. I have the acts and proceedings from 2017. The recommendation 4 is the one dealing with those two documents. I believe 593 is the page where it is covered, but page 28 is where it reads recommendation number 4. Yeah, page 539. Sorry, switch those. Was moved, duly seconded with an amendment, and the amendment was defeated, and then the recommendation was adopted. So there was a change in the title of what the Bible teaches was changed to an alternate understanding of, and then that recommendation was adopted.
Can we just pause for a minute? Okay. At the moment, we're going to deal with the motion to table.
Moderator, if I may, if the information that is being sought is at hand, I'm willing to withdraw the motion. I just thought that was the sticking point. So if it is an ongoing sticking point, then I will stay with the motion. But if we have the information at hand, I'm happy to withdraw.
Moderator, I'm not sure the information would answer all the questions at this point. So I think we're better off to go through, table the motion, have some time to look to see if it's going to answer all the questions that have been brought up, and then return to this when it's opportune.
Okay. Are you in agreement with that? Yeah. Okay. Okay, we're voting on the motion to table. Are you in favor? Any opposed? It's tabled for now.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. Do you want me to do number 2 now? I'm just following the orders of those that know more than me, which is a whole lot of people.
We have a
Sean? Which one is Sean? Did you ask for the motion to be tabled? Was it the motion or the report that you wanted tabled?
Of the motion. The motion is, the question is on the motion. So I was just asking that the motion be tabled.
All right.
Okay, moving to recommendation 2.
Thank you, moderator. On recommendation 2, moved and seconded.
That the intention of the Committee on Church Doctrine be affirmed to continue exploring the questions and realities around medical assistance in dying, and its intention to submit reflections to the General Assembly that will assist the Church to respond faithfully and practically. Okay, number 3.
Moderator, I submitted an amendment to this recommendation. Angela J. Collini, Presbytery of Pickering, and seconded by Mark Chang, Presbytery of Edmonton, Lakeland.
Okay, the amendment is on the screen.
Moderator, I move this amendment to the motion as presented because I feel that the response of the Committee on Church Doctrine does not emphasize or put into action the spirit and intention of the 147th General Assembly. If the Committee on Church Doctrine is truly aware that the landscape around medical assistance in dying has developed significantly in current years, they will understand the important implications that continue to impact children of God and families in our church. As a pastor who has walked with those who have chosen MAGE, said prayers holding their hand as they took their last breath, and walked with their family as they grieved their beloved family's loss, I am deeply saddened by the church's response, my church's response, to such an important issue. Losing a loved one or choosing MAGE has wide-reaching implications. We need a new document using terms everyone understands that are currently relevant, and not using terms that are harmful or triggering. God loves all of us, and to add stigma is harmful and judgmental.
Mike 1.
I just need a second because I also had an amendment and it's not that one. So she got here first. So let me just think.
Okay, number 2.
Kathy Gale, Calgary McLeod. I came to the mic to speak to the original motion 2, but I can support this amendment, and I would speak in favor of the motion as a whole if it was to pass. Just as a background, our session had lengthy discussions similar to what has been expressed a few minutes ago, and about the importance of updated and gracious language. And we felt strongly that the language needed to be updated and to be more reflective of our current times. This was also a topic of discussion at our presbytery, and similar comment was made. So thank you very much, moderator, for that moment.
Thank you. Number 1.
Thank you, Matthew Rattan from the Presbytery of Barrie. So now this amendment is on the floor. So we'll vote on the amendment and then we can continue. Okay.
Okay.
So I think I'll hold for now until after this is dealt with.
Okay, number 3.
Thank you, moderator. Tom Summers, Presbytery of Halifax and Lunenburg, would like to speak in favor of this as well, and the need for us as a denomination to really be able to address the realities of medical assistance in dying in our society, and to be able to provide language that is very helpful and not harmful to people. And so I would very much affirm the need for doing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 3.
Sean Howard, West Toronto. Moderator, I would be much more comfortable allowing the Committee on Church Doctrine to use the terminology that through its explorations it finds best. I'm not here to advocate for one term over another. I'm here to advocate for the freedom of the committee. The reason that I bring this up is I know at a previous assembly where I was present and a report was made, and I know we can get lost in terminology, and I don't want to, but I know the point has been made in the past that a particular terminology was chosen by the committee for its own purposes. And so I would speak against that aspect of the motion, but I'm in support of the remainder. So as it stands, I would need to vote against the motion I think they need to come up with their own terminology and inform the assembly, not the other way around. Thank you.
Number 2.
Moderator Courtney Crawford from Presbytery of Waterloo, Wellington. I would speak in favor of this amended motion. I have journeyed, as a minister, I have journeyed with families who have gone through the MAID process, and some of them have done so on their own because they have been concerned about what the church would think about this, and that they would offend others. People would not think they were Christian and of deep faith, and I think that we need to do better and to work together to provide support as a church related to families and individuals dying with grace and surrounded by a community, a Christian community of love.
Thank you. Number 3.
Thank you, moderator. Neil Ellis, Lindsay Peterborough. I speak in favor of the amendment as well. And I would note that the term medical assistance in dying, MAID, is the term that is used by the government of Canada. And having that consistency of language within our documents will make it easier for our ministers and for the members of our denomination to better understand and have a sense of how we as a denomination are working through and dealing with this issue, which is a deep import for us. So I speak in favor of the amendment.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. We'll move on now to, we're going to vote on the amendment before you. Yaris, how would you vote? In favor? Opposed? Commissioners have been advised. How do you vote? Those not in favor? The amendment carries. Okay, now we'll vote on the motion as amended. Go ahead.
Thank you, moderator. Matthew Rattan, Presbytery of Barrie. I just want to share a few thoughts as it relates to this. I will speak in favor of the motion, but just highlight a few things why I think this is of a particular pastoral nature and urgent. I do take issue with the term medical assistance in dying. I prefer physician-assisted death. I think it's actually still a neutral term, but is anyway. I do support the thrust of the motion, but part of the reason I think this is of an urgent pastoral care is because the landscape is changing so rapidly. I've talked to funeral directors, I've talked to families and people, and it's a very challenging situation. But also I think people need to be aware of how quickly it's changing. Some of the checks and balances as it relates to different pathways to take physician-assisted death or MAID, those are changing. Some of the checks and balances are becoming lessened. Also, there has been a plan to expand this to people struggling with mental illness. To me, that seems a bit counter to some of the work we've done in terms of mental well-being and life and joy and everything else. So it's a challenging situation. I'm happy that Bill C-39 will delay that because they acknowledge that more work needs to be done. But it's a matter of grave concern how this is accelerating and broadening in the culture. So I support that we practically move on and reflect on it theologically and urgently. I know that there's no timeline indicated, but my hope is we would see this as an urgent matter of pastoral concern.
Thank you. Okay, so as amended. Okay, number 2.
Leslie Kinghorn from the Presbytery of Niagara. I'm sorry, somewhere along the line, I think I'm missing some of the point. The medical assistance in dying is a very personal thing between the patient and the family. Are we looking at the church being a part of the conversation in them making that decision? Or are we looking at being the support, just the background support after the decision has been made to help them get through what people still think is a stigma?
Thank you. That's a good question. So this conversation has been ongoing in the church for at least the last 7 years, and informally before that as well. Let's try that. Is that better? All right. My apologies. The conversation has been ongoing within the church for the last number of years, and the church produced a paper, or rather the Church Doctrine Committee produced a paper that was an attempt to respond to that made a number of cases and used language that the General Assembly that it was presented to struggled with. That assembly changed its title. And so that is the issue that we're responding to. However, in direct response to your question, what I understand and what I believe the church is trying to do is say this is a reality that we're facing. Our pastors are journeying with people who want to know that God is with them in these trying moments, in these times of transition. And what is the church's stance, and how does the church respond to that? And so that's why it was originally sent to the Church Doctrine Committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 1.
Peggy Lennings, Presbytery of Waterloo, Wellington. Moderator, I support the spirit of the amendment. I just question the timeline. This is the 148th General Assembly, and that says 150th. And people talk about urgency, and I don't think 2 years reflects urgency. I don't want to change the amendment, but I don't think that timeline, perhaps that's what it would take, but I think that we should try and do better as a church.
Number 3.
Moderator Angela J. Clooney, Presbytery of Pickering. My intention would be today, but I know that the church, my friends on the Committee on Church Doctrine need time to work. So my hope would be that they would be able to come back next year to General Assembly, 149th year, with a preliminary document and possibly a final document and 150th General Assembly. I was just giving the church an opportunity to do its work, which takes time and study and reflection and prayer.
Thank you. Number 1.
Hi there, moderator. Byron Kappas, Presbytery, Bruce Maitland. I wanted to speak to something very briefly that was mentioned a couple people back about the language. First of all, I agree that made is the proper language, but also to make it an issue of mental health, I think is not helpful. To the idea that doctors would not do their due diligence and in their relationship with their patients. I know we get a little paranoid about doctors, they don't care about their patients, but I think the reality is that's not true. And to tokenize people with mental health issues for this issue, I think is an improper way of looking at it. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 3.
Moderator Chris Clark, Presbytery of Ottawa. I would be so bold as to move that we change it to 149th because it doesn't need to be a final document. It could just be a document. And I also think we're basically telling them we want a way to do this and walk alongside people, which takes some of the work out, right? Because we're taking one of the options off the table almost before we even start, which is maybe crass to say openly, but is true. So I would move, I don't have a seconder, but I would love to see 149. Oh, you can pick, I guess. Or friendly amendment is what I'm hearing.
Doug Kendall. Seconding. All right. Yars, are you in favor of this amendment? Any opposed? Commissioners are advised. How do you vote? Are you in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. This is the amended motion that the Committee on Church Doctrine produce a document for the 149th General Assembly using the term medical assistance in dying made that will assist the church to respond faithfully and practically in pastoral situation. Yeah. Okay. Yars, how do you vote? And are you in favor? Any opposed? Commissioners have been advised. Are you in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Before we continue with hope and, what is it? Hope and possibility with our clerk, principal clerk, I'm going to, let's say, do this little song again. Da wow peace to quay. Oh, you're such good students. Name me waiting. Ewa pamitan. Da wow peace to quay. Okay, together. Da wow peace to quay. We got to sing together now. Sing with me, in other words. Okay. Da wow peace to quay. Name me waiting. Name me waiting, name me waiting, Ewa pamitan. Welcome, come in. Welcome, come in. I am so glad. I am so glad to be seeing you. To be seeing you. I am so glad. I am so glad. And together. I am so glad, I am so glad to be seeing you. And I'm glad that we got to stand up for 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you.
Moderator, before I finish, and I know you want to bless us and adjourn us, I just need to make one more announcement, which is that the minutes of the General Assembly, the first 4 Sederunts of the General Assembly are now ready, and they will be posted on PC Biz. They'll be posted on PC Biz. They'll also be posted on the Presbyterian Church website. We need you to go and check the minutes when you have time. And if you find any errors like spelling mistakes or other errors that you think, I think I need to point those out, please let us know, either the clerks or Terry Lee or at the General Assembly office, and we'll correct them. They may still go through a couple of more fine-tuning revisions, but they are up, and so we invite you to check them. Thank you.
Can we stand and pray? Heavenly Father, we come before you. Heavenly Father, we come before you in the Lord Jesus Christ, in the power of the Holy Spirit. We give you thanks for this day that we have been given and the work that you've given us. We pray that there will be fruits of our work will be resounding into the future. We pray for the hope that we have talked about this afternoon, hope for the future of our church, hope for the future of this earth, for humanity, for peace, for love, all those beautiful things that you are teaching us through the church and through your word. We pray for all the people who are suffering, who are going through things like Israel, Palestine, and all the troubled places in this world. We pray for the First Nations and the people who are going through so many things that it is hard to understand how people can continue going. We pray for the youth of the church and the special time I shared this afternoon with the youth around that table. Bless them richly. For the ministers and leaders and the commissioners and all who are here, we ask your blessing. May they go out and enjoy the evening and have a good rest this evening. We ask these things in Jesus' name and for his sake. Amen. The meeting is adjourned until 9 a.m. tomorrow morning in this room. Have a good rest.